All right, so this week we're going to be talking about grouping and aggregation. And you may have come across this before, but this is actually probably one of my favorite things you can do in SQL, because I think it goes from being, like getting some information out to actually like doing something pretty substantial and pretty intriguing. And what I mean by aggregation and grouping is we are going to take multiple rows and turn them into one. So if I, real quick, let's just select everything from, let me make sure I have the right database set up here. I'll use Sequila. So let's take a look here in our Sequila table. I want to look at, let's look at payment. All right, so we can see our payment amount on all of these. We can see our staff ID and that sort of thing. So let's say that we wanted to get kind of some stats about our staff. We want to see, okay, who's performing the best? Like, who is there any staff member that does better than the other? And then we'll also, let's do it a little differently. Let's do customer. We want to look at our customers, and we want to see some stats about, some various things. And these are things that might be really intriguing to a business owner. Like, for example, what's the average amount that people spend when they have a transaction with our business? Because that might help you make some pricing decisions, so on and so forth, that sort of thing. Or how many rentals does someone do in a month? So that's some of the things that we're going to learn how to answer. So let's start writing some of this. So the first one we're going to do is a group by, and it's an additional clause. So what I'm going to start off with is I'm just going to select, and we can do this one without a group by actually. Let's select the average amount from payment. So then we can see our average amount, 4.2. So, that's over time. But what if we wanted, is most of the time what we want to see is we want to see like the average amount, let's say by month, right? Because we have some decent data in there by month, not necessarily by week. A lot of times I like to see average weekly, but we're going to do average monthly. So this is where we kind of have to start doing this. So just like when we ran this query, we got our average, it spit out one number. Because really what it did is it took all of these records, all these values in the amount column, and it condensed them. It did some sort of operation to turn many of those numbers into a single number. So in this case, that's what aggregation is. We're taking many and aggregating it into a fewer number of rows. So what we're going to do is we want to aggregate these by a specific group. And in this case, we want that group to be the month of payment date. It's called payment month. And we'll call that average amount. So now if I go to try to run this, you'll notice that I get an error, and it says an aggregated query without a group by expression. Basically it says that we have to, an aggregated query without group by expression one of select list contains a non-aggregated column. So what we need to do is we need to specify how we want to aggregate this. Basically, we need to tell it how we want it to handle the month of payment date. So what we can do is we can say group by, and then ideally the easiest thing to do is you can just add everything that you want to be constant across your groups. So in this case, it is payment month. We want that to kind of remain the same, meaning that we don't want to perform any operations on it. We want the average amount by That's kind of how I like to remember it. We want the average amount by the payment month. So let's run this and see what we get. All right, you'll notice that we get the actual month, but we're not doing year and stuff. So we need to make a couple of adjustments here. So let's do concat year payment date. Let's put a nice little dash in there. And instead of month, I'm going to do month name. And then we can finish off our concat. And notice we won't have to change anything here because we're still grouping by this first column. So we should be able to do that. And there we go. So now we have some of our different data here, which it looks like is all the same, which is a little odd. We just don't have a lot of data in there. But now we can see that we have some interesting data that we can look at. And in this case, it's not all that interesting because it's largely the same. I'm guessing that it's hard because again, there's some missing data, but by looking at this, February might be a current month. That might be we're currently in the month of February, and that's why our average amount is a little lower. It's hard to say. But anyways, the point of this is we can aggregate, and we're going to do a couple more here because it's a lot of times we might want to do multiple aggregations within the same query. So let's take a look at payment here. Let's say we want the number of transactions, right? So we have the average amount, but we want to see the number of transactions that we had. How many purchases did we have? So let's add that in, and we're going to do count of payment ID. Number of purchases of payments, I guess. So now we're going to run this again. And now you'll notice we get the number of payments. Nice. And we didn't have to add anything to the group by here because this is another aggregation. So we want the count of payments and the average amount grouped by the year month, if that makes sense. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me. If something's confusing, does this make sense to everybody so far, this group by?
I was wondering if you could just refresh my memory in the order that the statements are run, like when we have to use the alias, because it looks like in group by we have to use the alias.
So yeah, that's a great question. So let me refresh and then I'll answer your question about the alias, because there is a kind of nifty, you might call it a nuance, you might call it a hack, you might call it a tip. But let me refresh your memory and then we'll cover that because that's a great question.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep. So when we run our queries in SQL, there's a certain order that they run. So like just for example, I'm going to select first name from customer, where last name like W. Let's just do that. Order by 1. All right. So just tried to make a quick query here so we could see order of operations. So the first thing that the computer does is it looks at the from clause. It says, where am I getting my data from? That's the first thing it does. And I like to think of it like if before computers, when you went to the library and you were looking for a book and you wanted to know in what shelf it was, they had everything indexed with filing cabinets and the little index cards that kept everything organized. So the first thing you need to know is, okay, where do I get my data? So customer. Okay, so this is where I'm getting my data from. The next thing it does is the where clause. So it says, okay, here's all my data. Now what I want to do, so I like to think of it like a filing cabinet. Here's the filing cabinet that I need to get into. And specifically maybe the drawer, right? So here's my drawer. I have all the stacks of papers inside this drawer. But now I'm looking for a certain subset of papers, right? And maybe I'm looking for all the books that start with W, or whatever. So in this case, we're in a filing cabinet full of people, we're full of customers. So maybe they're alphabetized. Let's hope that they are. So then what we're going to do is we're going to look and we're going to find all the papers where the last name starts with a W. So that's the next thing we do. Then we take that stack of papers and we have them. Now, let's say from that stack of papers or folders, all we want from there is everybody's first name. That's the last part. The third part, not the last, third part of the query is we choose what we want to see. And in this case, it's the first name. And then finally, the last step of all is we choose how we want to order it. But let's see. I might have to refresh my memory a little bit. The order by might come first. There's a great article on the person who actually invented this class, who wrote all the curriculum here, that really goes in great detail as to the order. Okay, so the order by does go first. And I'm going to put this in the chat because just if anyone wants a refresher, this is a great scenario because it has like, oh, if it has the queries, I like to just go straight to if it has all of them, because it doesn't change. The order doesn't change. You just add extra steps. So the order by does go first. So it finds where you're getting the data. You filter out the things you don't need or the things that you do need. You order it, and then you show what you want to see. So the select is actually the last thing that you see, the last thing that performs. And really it's just like it's a granularity thing. So like you start with it's problem solving. We find the data we need, we do all of our filtering, we sort it, and then we present essentially. And that changes just a little bit when we have a group by and stuff, because it just adds a couple steps in between. So in this case, we don't have a where clause. So we get our data, we don't have a where clause, we skip that step. The next thing that actually happens is this group by. And really, basically starting from the from clause, it just goes down, and then you run the select statement last as far as order of operations. So now that we've refreshed that, back to the alias question. So I have our payment month here, and oh, we have payment month here, which can kind of be confusing. And just some database systems do not allow you to do this. So the alternative to this is you can actually just take and put whatever you have here, and this actually will end up being the same thing. So I have my alias here, payment month, and I can use the alias in the group by to save me all this stuff. Like you can imagine if we have like a complex case statement or something, it just makes it look cleaner. But it is exactly the same thing as this. So as far as order of operations, MySQL is kind of there are some systems that are a little bit contrary to this. But MySQL does allow you to use the alias in the group by, which is actually really nice. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, great question. So you can choose. So general rule of thumb, how I kind of got my head around group by clauses. If you're confused why it's not working, if you have, I like to put all my aggregate functions at the end of my select statement. And then I just know general rule of thumb, oh, if I have something in front of it, then it needs to be grouped by that, right? So that's kind of the general rule of thumb, but really the way to think about it is, okay, what do I want to group by? So let's do another exercise with in the same vein here, but we're going to kind of take it from a different angle. So I want to see the average amount and the average payments, or maybe the totals. Let's see the total of transactions and the average amount by customer. So I'm going to start with this actually similar select statement where we're just going to pull all of our customer information. So I'm going to select everything from customer. So there's all of our customer data. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to join that to our payments. So I'm going to interjoin payment P on C.customer ID is equal to P.customer ID. Right. So we match up. And then what we're going to do is let's actually just pull that. I like to see all my data. Okay, here's all my data. Mary Fowler. Here's all of her transactions. Every time she's bought something with our business, it's here. So basically what I want to see now is I want to see, okay, how many orders does Mary Fowler have? So like right now, we see a lot of records for her. So what I want to do is I want to keep my customer ID. So let's say customer ID. I want to keep my first name and my last name, obviously. And let's say also email. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to see the number of orders. So we're going to do a count of payment ID. And I'm going to run it. And again, it's going to throw that error because we don't have a group by clause and it doesn't know how to handle it. It doesn't know how to put everything together. So this is one of those cases where this is kind of my nifty little trick. Everything that I want to remain the same. I want all my customer information to be across, I want these to become the singular row essentially. We're going to take the multiple rows and these are all going to have the same values for all those rows, but we're just going to condense it down into a singular row. Let's go ahead and run that. And you'll notice that Mary Fowler, who used to have many rows, is now down to just one. And all those rows just became a count of 32. And so on down the line. So now what we want to do is we want to also get the amount. So let's get the average amount as average order total. And there's our average order total. And you'll notice it's a little, it's got some stuff going on there. So let's go ahead and round this. And our round function, let's see if we can get that to pull up again here. Our round function, let's round it to 2. So that way it looks, nice and pretty. So now we can look at this and we can now we can really start to see, okay, who are our best customers, right? So at a quick glance, you might think, oh, Mary Fowler, because she had 32 orders, but her average is only 371. But if we look at like Linda Williams, she had 26 orders for 522, or Patricia Johnson, who had 27 orders at 477. So she might be our best customer. Well, we're about to find out, because really what we're going to do is we want to see the total amount. So we're going to sum the amount as average, or not as average, as total revenue. So now we can see all of our customers and a bunch of interesting statistics about our customers individually. And this is really where the power of databases starts to become fun and interesting, because then we can not only use the data to like display and stuff, but we can actually start making some smart decisions. And this is where businesses say, oh, this is worth the money that I spent hiring someone to run a database because of these kind of views. So let's take another approach. Same thing here. We're just going to add one more kind of ordeal to this. So let's say we're kind of putting forth some of our best customers. Because let's say we want to find our best customers and we want to say, hey, look, we want to find out what you're doing. What are there any trends with these customers? Maybe some of the people who are around the business more know specific nuances about certain things. So let's do having. So we want to find customers who are over $100 of total revenue. So we're going to say having the sum of amount greater than equal to 100. So this having clause, this is probably one of the first times you've seen it. This having clause is actually it's like a where clause. That's how I like to think of it, because we did our aggregation, right? We have our sum of amount as total revenue. The having clause is a filter for the aggregations. And just to kind of put this into perspective of what it does, if I were just to say where the sum of amount is greater than 100, you'll notice that it throws an error. It says invalid use of a group function. And we can't use a group function here. And the reason being is because of order of operations. Really, take that out, same result. So that's why we need a having clause, because it has to perform the aggregation prior to filtering. Because the way this is going to work is it's going to run the from clause, which is all this, and then it's going to do the grouping. So if we had a where clause, it performs the where clause prior to aggregation. So like if I wanted to find where C dot last name is, like, let's say we want to just find our W people again. Now we're only going to get people whose last name starts with W, because this happens before it aggregates it. So before we even begin to aggregate our data, it filters out people whose last name starts with W. So that's why we need to have the having clause. It's basically a way for us to filter on our aggregated data. All right. So there's our having clause. And just so you can see, you can kind of chunk those together, just like I like to think of this as like the aggregated where clause, because really the only difference between where and this is you put aggregated columns here, and instead of where you put having. So it's really pretty simple. All right, and there is our group by clause. Let's take a look here. And one last thing, just since we're on order of operations, if we had an order by, we could do that as well. And let's say we want to order by our total revenue. When I'm like doing stuff like this, I like to make it easy sometimes. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we want the top first, so we're going to order by 7 descending. And now we will be sorted by total revenue, highest to lowest. We could also do this. All right. So you can see this is kind of neat, because now we have our really our best customers, all-time best customers listed first, and we also get to see like, okay, what's the transaction count and the average order total. So you can see that the people who have both higher volume and quantity obviously are there. Yeah, and maybe we would want to add rental to this to see like, okay, let's actually try it. Let's see what's in rental here. Let's look. We have inventory. I just want to know, is there a way to tie multiple movies to one? It doesn't look like it. It looks like when you rent something, it is just for one film, because rental is one-to-one with our inventory, which is one-to-one with film, which is one-to-one with payment. So we don't need to worry about that. That's the nice thing about keeping your business simple. So yeah, not too many levers there. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question about null.
Okay.
I was reading and it looks like null does not affect a lot of the counts, a lot of these aggregate functions, but you can count it as, or some, one of them it does take, but the other ones it doesn't count it into the amount. But what if you wanted to count how many null values there are? Is there a way to do that? Or is that, would you use another program to pull things out? Or how best do I work with null? I'm just trying to get my head around all of the null properties.
No, that's a great question. So how I like to handle null is I like to handle it in here. So most of the time, like, if there's, you kind of know if there's going to be a null there, or you do some descriptive analytics to check. But if you know that it's going to be a possibility and you need to handle it, it's pretty easy. Like, let's say that sum might be one of those that has a null. So what I like to do is I like to wrap it in a function like is null. And what I'll do is I will just switch it out for a 0. And so that way, if amount is null, maybe I want to count it as a 0. Maybe I want to count it as something else. Sorry, I think it's a little different here. If null. There we go. So basically I can change that null into a 0. And I think the reason why it's a little different how they're handled in each situation is because you might want to handle it a little differently. For example, if we're doing count, do we want to count it or not? If we're doing a, there might be some different things that you might have to do, but your if null, you can do a couple different things to kind of handle those.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Trying to think of another good example. Has someone who done the reading, did they cover partition by at all in the material?
No, I just finished it all and did all my notes and I didn't see it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't see that either.
Okay, then I will not confuse you further with it. So, yeah.
Except for if it is something that's going to count and we have these videos to go back on, that's not a bad thing. So I guess it depends on if this is a good place to cover it and have it be in our knowledge base, or.
Yeah, so maybe I will just touch on it real quick, just so you know it exists, because it is really handy. So I like to think of this kind of like a pivot table, where kind of you end up kind of like shifting, not quite a pivot table, but we're grouping and aggregating by grouping. But there's some times that we might want to say, like, let's add month to this. So like if I were to say, okay, I have my customer, all my customer information, but I want to see this kind of monthly. So let's add the month name. Let's do concat year. Actually, let's just do year of payment date. And let's do month name. And we will concat those. So we're just going to call that transaction month, and naturally we need to change some of our group by here. So we're going to just see customer ID, and we're going to add jobs. Transaction. Also forgot my alias, so let's put that in there. Let's see if we run here. Oh, and that is interesting. There we go. Okay. Because we changed it to per month, not many people had $100 per month. In fact, only one person had $100 of revenue in a specific month. So anyways, but what I want to see here is I want to see what is the, because we can see that Eleanor Hunt, and in fact, let's change our order by, because what I want to do is I want to order it first by the transaction month and then second by the total revenue. Actually, no, let's go second by the customer and then by total revenue. All right, so you can see we have all of our 2005 August information. Mary Fowler. And in fact, you know what? Let's take this off and I'm going to swap that. I want to go by customer, then by month, then by total. Okay, so this is the view I wanted. So now I can see all of Mary Fowler's data here. August, July, June, and May of 2005. And we would want to, I'm going to show you another little quick hack here. Whenever we want to sort by like a date that we kind of fabricated, we can just add p.payment date here. And we'll add it here. And instead of, even though we're not going to show it, we're going to order by it. So instead of ordering by one here, we're going to order by p.payment date. And even though, because our transaction month is derived from the payment date, it'll be sorted in the order we want. Hopefully. Let's see. Order by two. Oh, we did it twice. So we want it sorted by the customer ID first, which is 3. And we can take this right off. There we go. All right, so now we have our people here. You can take you off there. Order by clause is not in the group by. So let's fix this just a little bit. We're gonna go. And let's just make it work here. Basically, we can add a sort key, which is just a number, but we're not going to worry about it right now. CP payment date. What don't you like here? Order by. Missing the comma. All right. So let's just roll with this here. So it might be a little out of order, but we're just going to go with it. So basically what I'm going to try to do is I want to keep my kind of current view, but what I want to do is I want to see what what the total is across all these, right? Because maybe I want to be able to export this to Excel and say, oh, what is the percentage by month of this customer's orders? So what we can do is we can do what's called a window function. So I'm going to change this order by here. Actually, let's copy it. So we can say over partition by, and then in this case, we can say something that we want to kind of have here. So in this case, try this. Let's see, what is we want to see the sum of the total even across the month. So let's try this here. Well, what the over partition by clause does is it's a window function. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this same thing that we had here. We're going to take our amount, and I'm going to take the if null out of it just so it's easier to understand. So we're going to take our sum of amount, but this one we're going to do a little different. We're going to say over. And what this is going to let us do is it's going to kind of get the overall. Oh, and we have an issue. Expression number 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is not happy. So let's take out our group by real quick. We're just going to slim this down. So for the sake of explaining this partition by. All right, let's try this again here. Oh, let's take you out too. All right, so what the over clause does, which is it's a little confusing, it's a window function, but you'll notice that we have our total revenue, but we still have all of our original rows. So let's add our amount here. So now you can see that we have our P amount and our total revenue. And what's nice about this is, let's say we wanted to figure out, oh, what was the percentage of, like this cell was 299, what percent of the total is that? Now we can do that. So basically what the over does is our group by condenses all of our rows. The over will calculate it externally and just append it to all the rows. It's kind of like a join. We could do the same thing with a join. It just kind of is a little quicker way for us to do it before us. Or, you know, if we wanted to say the average. So let's say we want to compare, okay, this was all of her orders, but what was her average of all of her orders? And how does it compare? So like, okay, this one was under her average. This one was under her average. This one was over, under, over, over, over. You know, you can see where that might be helpful. I don't think you're going to need to worry about it for any of this class. But it is something I wanted to make you aware of, because it is something that people often try to do, especially in some of these reports, or you might want to say, oh, I want to see like all this customer's info and their total per row. So that way, when I export it to Excel, I can quickly do some math, if that makes sense.
I have another question. I don't know if it's something you can cover
Okay.
or address. It's just the roll up. I don't quite understand what it's doing.
Roll up.
It's talking about generating roll ups with multi-column grouping. And I'm not quite, I mean, I can see what it does, but I'm not quite sure how we use it.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. So let me take this back to where we were, hopefully. Here we go. Let's make sure it works. All right. So the roll up function, let's just put it in there. That would be the easiest way. So the with roll up function, basically what it does is it kind of like puts a total together. So if we wanted to see like the total of so and so The roll up kind of does that. So let's see. I'm trying to think of a good example that might demonstrate this really good. Let me simplify this down to just our month. I'm going to take, let's just take our customer. Let's just take the month out of here. It's kind of like in Excel where you have a total row. So I'm going to take out our order by. And this should help make a little bit more sense. And actually, let's just do it by customer ID. I think that will be the easiest, cleanest way here, because the roll up can add some confusion. There we go. Actually, you know what? Let's do sorry, I keep confusing myself on what the best method here is. So we are going to keep our month, but what we're going to do is we're going to put that under our customer email. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our email be first, then we're going to have our month. This is kind of one of those where you have to kind of choose how you want to see things, and it can, depending on your data, can change. Transaction month. Okay. And then we're going to take out this again. All right. So what we're going to do in this view is we're going to see with this roll up, what the difference is you'll notice that it kind of sorts this for us. So we have Aaron Selby here. And you'll notice that we see like his original rows, just like we had before, where we had Aaron Selby. Here's the month, and here's his transaction count, his average order total, and his total revenue, just like normal. But then the only difference, so what this with rollup does is it adds this line right here. And you'll notice this says null. But if you were to add up 12 plus 5 plus 3 plus 4, it would equal 24. Or it would be the
any numerical value, it sounds like it will roll those together and give you a total.
exactly.
And leave a null in something that is like you can't add up months.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So it gives you like a line total, a subtotal.
That makes so much sense. Now even the book makes sense. I was just trying to put it together. I didn't quite get what they were doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. So yeah, because basically, you know, like our main category, so to speak, is our customer. And so what it's doing is it's giving us a subtotal for whatever qualifier column we have. So in this case, unquantifiable data. So in this case, our email and our transaction month. So in this case, we're grouping our transaction month underneath our customer. So yeah, we end up with this null value here because we're adding all those together. So all of Aaron Selby's data, he has a total count of 24 across all of his total lifetime. So in this case, all of his months, his average order total for all of his months is 462. And then his total revenue is 110. So this is actually a really nice view, especially if you kind of want like those nicer kind of looks. Because you do have that total, because then it's like, oh, I can see the breakdown by month like we had before, but I also get that running total. I don't have to pull two separate reports. It kind of puts them together for us. But it, like I said, you notice like the more I had, the more messy it got. You have to be really careful with how you sort it, because if you have an order by clause, it kind of puts it out of order, that kind of stuff. So yeah. But yeah, glad you brought it up. Any other questions? Alrighty. Well, I will let you guys get to it. This is actually a lot of fun stuff. But it is, I think if you understand it from the beginning, it's very straightforward. So when I first kind of went through, I kind of was a little shaky on what it did. But I just happened to realize that, oh, if I just put whatever non-aggregate columns here, it works the way I expect it to. But once I finally realized, like, okay, this group by, it's grouping data by these columns, and that made sense to me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why they call it group by. So hopefully this kind of helped get that foundation, so that way you're not going in just guessing, because it is really cool what you can do with it. It's super cool. But anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, good luck this week, and yeah, we'll talk soon.